So, welcome. This is the Terra Nova training. I'm going to provide to you today a brief overview of some of the new guidance or updated guidance from DoDEA regarding the administration of the Terra Nova. This is intended to go along with the webinar that you guys have already been provided. Tons of questions have been coming in because, as you know, this is this is something that's came out later than apparently it has in previous years. So I know that we've made some changes. There's been a lot of questions. So I've tried to compile them in this PowerPoint, and I'll go over all of those today. But if there's still additional questions, I can't promise you I'll have the answers, but you can post those to me and I'll add them to the list and continue to provide those answers as I get them. I'm not going to read everything that's on the PowerPoint slides. What I'm going to do instead is highlight different areas for the schools to review on their own time. If I'm going too fast, please stop me. I'll try to continue to look at the chat window. In fact, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of it now so I can keep up with the questions. But stop me if I'm going too fast or if you want to clarify something, and we'll try to answer those questions as we move forward. We start out with the DoDEA policy, and this is simply the the overview of the policy regarding assessments. There's two assessment types. Today we're not going to go into the different assessment types. However, I encourage schools to become familiar with those. And if you guys would like to, either as a group or individually, have a session on the different types of assessments, the context of Terra Nova, we can certainly do that. I think today most people are most interested in the administration, though, of the assessment, and not the type of testament. What is a norm reference test? What does that mean? How is it different? But we can certainly do that at a later date if you're interested in that. There's the school coordinator's checklist. You all received in the test coordinator kit a checklist, which is to some degree not accurate because, as you all know, I've been sending out a couple of emails about the barcodes. But to some degree it is accurate because it at least gives you an overview of what you need to look for as far as in some of those different materials. Please let me know if you have any questions about any of the materials that you should still have at your school. The main difference is the barcodes that you guys were sent that did not show up on the checklist, and we'll get into some of the details of that here in a few minutes. We are asking that any irregularities, such as if you have a student sick or something, if something happens during testing that's an irregularity, please send me an email and copy Colleen Rohowski on that. So again, this is just an overview of Terra Nova. There's 5 content areas. It talks about when the baseline was established. Protocols. There are several different slides on protocols. Again, these materials will be made available to every administrator and area assessment coordinator after the recorded sessions are sent to you. Please go through each of the test protocols, go through your test booklet, review these. Even if you've given the assessment before and you're familiar with it, it helps to go over the protocols to make sure that we have all of our T's crossed and I's dotted. And again, you can just see here that these are quite lengthy slides, so it'll probably take a little bit of time to process this on your own time. Again, another security slide. What I'll do is that these are going to be made available on the Weebly site, and I'll send a link to that either later on this afternoon or tomorrow, and that way everybody can access this. This talks about security. These are pretty common things as far as in security, locking up things, not leaving them out, collecting them by a certified educator at the end of the day. None of this is new. Tests are distributed each day. You'll notice that there's things highlighted. When you see the things highlighted, bolded, underlined, this means in this notes that there's been issues with this in the past in our DoDEA schools. So please make sure that you look at those. We want to make sure that the tests are distributed each day, not prior to the testing day. Tests are returned to the assessment coordinator. As you all remember, in October, maybe before that, September, most of our schools signed a test security, a privacy, a confidentiality form. Only the assessment coordinator does this. The proctors do not have to sign this form because the intention is the assessment coordinator is there to monitor and collect the materials. So that's the reason the assessment coordinator signs this form, and that's the reason we have the assessment coordinator collect and maintain the security of these documents overnight. Again, these are things that you'll be able to read through yourself. You know, where do you lock them up at? What is a secure location? We'll start with some of the meat of this, the practice activities. The practice activity, a practice test is to be administered in the regular classroom, just like the Terra Nova test would be administered. So the same protocols. The kids bubble in, it's monitored the same way. This is a dry run, and it helps the students not only become comfortable with the testing environment, but it also allows the teachers to see, is there a student that's having difficulty with some logistics of the assessment? Let's test out the logistics. Let's make sure that we have all the materials that we need. The practice test has to be given in class. It's not to be sent home as homework. The kids can take the practice test home after they've completed it in class. Now, there were some questions from people about homeschool students and how the practice activities will be administered to them, and I'll get to that in just a moment. There's a few things we need to make sure that we pay attention to in regards to homeschool students and the practice activities. One of the things that also came up regarding the practice test is the question was asked, if the practice test is given, students take it home, and then teachers have copies of this practice test, what if the teachers use the material in the practice test in the days leading up to the actual administration of Terra Nova? Is that cheating? That's not considered cheating. We certainly don't support that practice, and we ask, that people use their, professional capacity to make those types of decisions. However, it's not cheating. The kids have those tests at home, so certainly they're practicing those activities and studying for the Terra Nova using those practice activities. The content of it is not so much that the coordinators in headquarters feel like that's considered, or CTB consider that that's something that's illegitimate. So, if so happened a teacher were teaching something that was on the practice activity after the practice test has been given, then that's not considered inappropriate. Of course, following the test directions exactly. Again, you'll notice exactly is bold and underlined because we do have people go off script sometimes. It's very important that when you train your proctors, you train your teachers, that you please ask them to read the directions word for word. And then you'll see some different references there. Electronic devices, cell phones, of course, this is something that all of you are probably familiar with. We just want to make sure that there's protocols. The key here is, what are your school's protocols? So throughout the PowerPoint over the next 20-30 minutes here, maybe hopefully not that long, the different guidance that you're being given, it's really up to the principals and the assessment coordinators to ensure that there's protocols in place at your school to ensure that the guidance is adhered to. So obviously there's not these electronic devices allowed in the testing area, so you guys would need to ensure that there's protocols in place to prevent this. Okay, I'm gonna, if you guys don't mind, mute a couple of people here because I'm picking up an echo. If you need to speak, you can certainly take yourself off of mute or use the chat box. In addition, the markers, highlighters, crayons, colored pencils, those kinds of things we want to make sure we control for. Down at the bottom, it says we allow number 2 pencils only. That's not anything new. However, Mr. Warford did ask me to please stress to principals and assessment coordinators that we want to ensure that in each classroom and for each student that we have number 2 pencils available. So whether or not you have baggies with pencils available for the teachers to check out in the morning, or however you do that, we want to ensure that we're not just relying upon the kids to bring pencils and that causes a disruption in the classroom. 10 kids get into a class and they don't have pencils, and then we're scrounging around on the day of the test to come up with this. So please take the appropriate actions to ensure that that doesn't happen. The test questions are designed so that students do not need to use a calculator, and in fact here on the second slide here it says calculators should not be used on part 1. Calculators can be used on parts 2 and 3 of the Terra Nova math assessment. However, Here's things to take in consideration. One, students should be familiar with the use of the calculator, so we don't want kids using a calculator if they have not done so before. In addition, if the students in a class have not used calculators before, and say a neighboring classroom they have, but they're all the same grade level, that would be an inconsistency. If one class is using calculators and the next one isn't, although the calculators are optional, there may be parents or students talking after school and saying, oh, well, in Miss Smith's class we used calculators, and Miss Johnson's class we didn't. Try to be consistent. Again, administrators and assessment coordinators need to collaborate to come up with consistent policy or procedures or protocols, whatever you want to call them, for calculators. If the students are familiar with them, they can use them. However, it needs to be a case where if it's available to one student, it's available to all students. And that's not just within the classroom. Again, it's from classroom to classroom. So we want to have consistency across the board. Calculators have already been ordered in the past by Dodge Europe, so they're saying we're not purchasing any calculators for schools. You have to use what you already have. So this is something that you want to take stock of and put these protocols into place ahead of time. Again, it's really important that we have consistency among classrooms as far as in the use of calculators. And this is being stressed because this has come up in the Med District before regarding one classroom having them available, the next classroom not having them available. Some clarifications on the materials. ESL 1 and 2s only take the CAT survey, the CAT Plus survey. So ESL 1s and 2s only take the CAT Plus survey. ESL 3s take the Terra Nova, all 5 parts, with accommodations. ESL 1s and 2s that take the CAT Plus survey also take Lost Links, and that's when we get into the Form A and Form B. Form A for Lost Links is given when you have new students or in the beginning of the year. Form B is given in the spring, and in a few minutes you'll see that there's some dates here in this PowerPoint to go by. The ESL team teachers, they usually handle the administration of this, but it's helpful to know the differences because when the Terra Nova materials came in, so did the Lost Links Form B. Again, it's not administered with the Terra Nova, it's not part of the Terra Nova, however the materials came in together. And Form B is for ESL 1s and 2s in the spring. There'll probably be a couple of questions later on about extra materials. A lot of schools have extra materials of Lost Links Form A. I'm waiting for an answer as far as in what we're going to do with those extra materials. Form B, you need to take stock and ensure you have enough Form Bs for the spring administration of that to your ESL students. But again, ESL 1s and 2s take CAT Plus. Grade 3 ESL 1s and 2s in the CAT Plus booklets, they actually write the answers. The other grade levels, they use the answer sheet. Okay? And again, here's some clarifications for that, and you'll see the dates here, the window for the administration of Form B, and you guys can work with your ESL people on that. Alright, so this goes over the accommodations and the reason why. The big difference is how we're documenting this year. This is again the requirements. You guys can read through why we have IEPs and what the categories are. The categories are actually listed in your test coordinator's manual. I believe the page is, maybe it says here page 9 to 21, but I think maybe page 27 has a list of them, but you'll I'm sure be able to find those quite easily, the different categories for accommodations, and in just a few minutes here we'll go over that in detail. So I'm actually going to fast forward past some of this and come back to it for accommodations. Okay, so accommodations 1s and 2s. If they've been 1 or 2 all year long, however, the ESL team and assessment coordinator and administration confers and they come together and you guys think that yes, they're a 3 and they can take the Terra Nova. If you want them to take the Terra Nova, 1, you need written documentation saying or evidencing that the child is prepared to take the Terra Nova. And 2, you need to ensure that there's accommodations. Yes, Daniel, this is all going to be, I'm going to send a link to the Weebly site, and all of this will be available for you guys. So if the 1s or 2s, they've been a 1 or 2 all year, no problem. They move to a 3. They're going to have the accommodations, but you have to have written documentation for this. Where are accommodations put? Well, there's 2 different ways that we're marking down accommodations this year. And just to give you some background, why is all the emphasis being put on the accommodations? Why do we have this new form? I know a lot of you are probably frustrated because this new form just came out in the last week or 2. And before, we had asked you guys just to email in your list of accommodations. DoDEA was fined thousands of dollars last year because our accommodations were not marked appropriately. So in response to that, this year, and again, you know, I do apologize that some of you are going to have to repeat your efforts on this. We have this form, which you'll be emailed, and each school will be asked to fill in the student name, their disability codes, accommodation categories, and a description of that category. And here, there's actually even a different page number. It says 32 of the test booklet manual. Each school will need to fill this out and send it back to me by March 1st. How will this form be used? Well, 1, you'll use this form to mark the accommodations on the actual Terra Nova test booklets. But 2, and this is probably most important for the preventing the fines, administrators are going to be asked to ensure that the accommodations are marked appropriately in the test booklets, so there'll be some oversight there. In addition, if people are gone over the summer, this spreadsheet will be held by people at the district area and headquarters level. So if there are questions about accommodations in some of the tests, then we have this form to access and we won't need to track people down. So the accommodations form is filled out and sent to me by March 1st. You'll probably need to meet with your 504 teams to ensure you have the appropriate accommodations and all the categories are marked appropriately. In each test booklet on the inside cover, and this is a visual of this is in your test, your assessment coordinator's booklet. In each student's test booklet, there's a place for accommodations. The accommodations need to be marked in each subject area. So, for example, if there's a student that has an accommodation in math, social studies, language arts, each one of those books, the accommodations need to be marked inside of those books. Where we've run into trouble is people have only put the accommodation in one of the test books and not on the follow-up subjects. So there's 5 subjects that could potentially have accommodations. They could be the same accommodations. It could be different accommodations. There could be a category 3 for math and a category 1 for reading. The point is, though, that the accommodation for each subject area needs to be marked, not only in one test book. If there's multiple categories for accommodations in one subject area, you put the highest number category. So if there's a category 1 and a category 3 accommodation in math, then you would put the category 3. Okay. So we're actually going to go back to where we left off with accommodations. Is there any questions? The only question I have so far about accommodations that I do have an answer for is if a student needs a scribe, can teachers type the answers? And the answer is no. If the student's accommodation is that they need a scribe, the teacher has to use a number 2 pencil and write in the student test booklet the answer. Christine, I'm not sure, you kind of popped up there on the screen for a second. Did anybody have any questions about the accommodations?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. We've been talking about the accommodation for it may be read except for the reading comprehension. And so now there's discussion about, does this include the whole reading section to include the questions and the answers that it cannot be read? Or is it just the passage that cannot be read?
I don't know the answer to that, but I will find out. So let me make sure I'm understanding the question. It's whether or not it's the passage that cannot be read or the question and the answers in addition?
Right. We figure it can't be the passage, but we want to know if that also means the questions and the answers.
Okay, I'll find that out for you.
Thanks.
Okay, give me 1 second. I'm going to just drop my notes. Okay. Homeschooled students. We talked about the practice test and the requirement that the kids have to take the practice test in class, just like a normal Terra Nova test. Homeschool students who are on a space-required, tuition-free basis, they have their shot records that they've provided you a copy of, or the school has a copy of their shot records. They have the appropriate ID. All the sponsorship is in order, and they're in an age-appropriate classroom. They can take the practice test. They can come to school to an age-appropriate classroom where space is available, and they can take the practice test along with the class that they would be in if they were in one of our schools. But again, and I clarify this in another slide later, in its essence, they have to be eligible to be one of our students, and all of the documentation has to be in order prior to the administration of the practice test. They can't take home a practice test with them unless they come to school and take the test alongside the other students. If they do not meet these requirements, if their shot records are not up to date, they don't have the appropriate ID, any of the things that would make them a qualified Dodge student, then they cannot have a copy of the practice test. And again, obviously they should be contacting you in advance to set this up. If parents, homeschool parents, wants to see the copy of the teacher's guidebook to Terra Nova, they can come and set up a meeting with the assessment coordinator or one of the principals, and they can certainly sit down and review the teacher's guidebook in a controlled environment. They can't take it home with them. They cannot see the teacher's direction book. That's different. If they're on an IEP, it has to be a DODEA IEP for the student to have that accommodation while they're taking this assessment. And then here's just some other things about transportation or whatnot for homeschool students, and you guys can review those. So again, the practice tests, they have to, I think we covered that pretty good. The IEP, the teacher's guide, not the teacher's direction. So back to protocols, again, some of this you'll be able to just kind of skim through on your own or print this out and go through this. This is about scores and how they're used. And again, if you guys would like for Joe and I to do a session on assessment types, norm reference versus the standards or criterion based, how scores are used, we certainly would not mind doing that with you guys. I just think that today's format is really for the administration. Unethical practices, I'm going to just skim through these. Again, these are things that you really need to internalize, so you'll read through these on your own. I also have 9 no-nos, kind of 9 big things to avoid that we'll show you in just a few minutes. Exclusion of students. One of the things that people have asked about, if a student gets sick during the administration of an assessment, what happens? Can they come back and take the makeup test? The answer is no. If a student is in the middle of, just say, for example, the math test, and they go home sick or they go to the nurse's office, that test is invalidated, and then you have to go back to what we said earlier. Any irregularities need to be reported to myself with Colleen Rohowski on copy. The test is invalidated, and that student may not come back and take that makeup test. They can come back the next day and take the other subjects that have yet to be administered, but they cannot revisit or come back to that test or take a makeup. And this is just about obvious things, photocopying the test and those types of things. The barcodes. So in your tests, your assessment kits, you guys received a list of students, and then you received the barcodes. It's up to the assessment coordinator and the principals to ensure that that list of students, along with the demographic information, is matched up to the barcode. Once that's been verified, after the test has been administered, the barcode goes on the back of the test booklet. If the barcode is inaccurate, you tear it up and dispose of in a way that protects PII. You dispose of the barcode, shred it or whatnot, and you handwrite in the information where the barcode would have been fixed on the back of the test booklet. Where do you get that information? It's all demographic information that's available from your registrar or an Aspen. So that would also apply to new students. If you have new students come in, the barcodes are already in your possession, or they came in after the barcodes were generated, then you would need to get with the registrar, get that information, and you write it on the back of the test booklet. The student information sheet, or what some people I believe called slip sheets or the answer sheets that would go inside the test booklet, we no longer have those. The barcodes have replaced that. Is there any questions about barcodes right now while we're on this subject? I know this is one of the biggies. Nope. Okay. There are some questions actually I'll share with you real quick about barcodes that came up, and in all honesty, I don't have the answers to these questions yet, but just so if they do come up, you know, we've already got this the barcode goes on the back of the test booklet, Daniel. The accommodations go on the inside of the front cover, and then the barcode goes on the back cover. There's teacher names on the barcodes that at best, from what I've seen, is random, particularly for our high schools. They do not coincide with the groups of students that that teacher would be administering the test to. Does that make the barcode, does that invalidate the barcode? I don't know the answer to that. I sure hope that they tell us that that's not going to be an issue, because from what I've seen so far is the teacher names and who the teacher would be administering the test to does not coincide. So we certainly would not want that to be an issue. However, I'm waiting for clarification on that. In addition, the group information sheet, you typically have had one per grade level, not one per teacher. We're going to clarify and ensure that this is the same for this year. Also, if there's, just say there's 70 ninth grade assessments and you have one group information sheet, what if they all don't fit in the same envelope? Do you have to have a second group information sheet? That's a question that we've posed as well. Okay. The test window is 3 weeks. You can see here that it says the test protocol, the shipping is on April the 5th. It's very important, extremely important, that assessment coordinators and administrators work together to ensure that the tests are sent with a tracking number, not just with a confirmation of delivery, but a tracking number that we can track them throughout the process. We are asking that each school send that tracking number to me so I can come up with a compiled or synthesized list and provide that to whomever might have to track down those packages if we need to. There's 3 weeks for the testing window. I'm going to skip over here to schedules real quick. The recommendation from the district, and there was some chatter back and forth as to whether or not this was going to be made a requirement or not, but because it's so late and so close to the testing window, it's only going to be made a recommendation. You have 3 weeks. The first 2 weeks, it's recommended you use those midweek days for testing and to try to avoid Mondays and Fridays. Do you have to do that? No. Again, it's just a recommendation. We are asking Mr. Warford and our assistant superintendents would like to have copies of the schedule on file. So if you could email those to me, preferably by close of business February 26th. I'm imagining most of you already have those schedules anyway. That's a fairly flexible day. I mean, if you need an extra day or two, that's fine. But please do email me a copy of those schedules. The third week is typically reserved for shipping so that we have plenty enough time and we're not pressured by that. But in essence, you have 3 weeks for administering the test, administering makeups, packaging, and shipping. If you have a student that's not going to be there for a special event, you do not need to get our authorization for the student to miss that test. They just need to do their makeup within the 3-week window. So principals and assessment coordinators can work together on those exceptions. One thing to note is we want to have a balance between, you know, we obviously want to encourage all the kids to come to school prepared and ready to take the test, but again, we talked about if students are sick, then their test is invalidated. So, you know, if a kid's sick and, you know, and probably won't make it through the day, we might want to encourage them to stay home and come back for the makeup day. Okay. Barcodes. The barcodes are gone over in the webinar. That's kind of a 55-minute, very from what I've gathered, very dry webinar that talks about the barcodes and the use of those. You guys can certainly review that. The barcodes go on after testing. We talked about the new students and what to do with barcodes that are not accurate. Assessment coordinators and principals can pull together teachers to help verify and match up the barcodes to that list of students. So, because that's a lot of students for one person or two people to be verifying. You guys can come up internally with how you're going to have a system to pull people together in small groups to help you verify those barcodes. That's up to each school. Okay, we talked about the 6 students, accommodations, floating proctors. Several questions have been posed. It has to be a proctor in there with each, with a teacher, 2 people per classroom. Typically what we recommend because of staffing issues is that you have a few trained proctors, that you have some protocol in place for relieving teachers if they need to have a break for a restroom or whatnot. Have a protocol though, so the teacher doesn't have to go flag somebody down. We want to make sure we maintain not only test security, but we want to maintain the quiet testing environment, so it's not a disruption to the students if their teacher needs to flag down one of the floating proctors. Another big issue that has come up in our district in particular that Mr. Warford asked me to cover is for assessment coordinators and principals to please ensure that their directions are given. If you're a classroom and your kids have finished the test, what do you do after you finish the test? Because there may be other classes still taking the test. If the test window is still open, have some protocols to maintain that quiet, safe, secure testing environment so we don't have some classes disrupting others. Please ensure that you guys can address that. There's a link here, and I'm just going to open it briefly to show you what it looks like, to the multi-age classrooms. What do you do if you have a multi-age classroom? And again, you'll see this is what it looks like. There's some fairly clear directions there that you will also be provided. Confidentiality forms. As you all remember, I came in October, and confidentiality forms were emailed around that same time frame. If you are able to, and this is just a request, you don't have to do this. It certainly would make life easier though here at the district office. If you're able to, if you have that confidentiality form and you're able to re-email that to me if you haven't sent it in the last month or two. I know some of you that have very recently sent your confidentiality form. If you did it earlier in the school year last fall, if you wouldn't mind just resending that to me, that would be great. Supplies, we already talked about the pencils and the calculators, of course, maintaining the security and consistency. The protocols, again, it's up to the administrators and the assessment coordinators to ensure that the guidelines for Terra Nova testing take place at your school. Making sure that the tracking numbers on the shipping, ensuring that the test environment is protected, and reporting any of the inconsistencies or anything that would invalidate a test. In addition, please make sure those accommodations are double checked with your 504 teams or ESL teams, and the accommodations are marked appropriately. I've already talked about that. You'll also be provided, when these are sent to you, these are basic 9 things not to do, and they're pretty much a synopsis of things we've already talked about already. However, I think it's more cut to the chase. This might be something that you would use with your teachers. And that is the end of the slideshow. That's the overview that I have. There was one more question that came up in the previous session that I do not have an answer for, but I wanted to let you know about. On page 40 of the Assessment Coordinator's Manual, it says that when you ship your test, on the outside of the box, schools should put their school's service code. Most of us have not seen that before, and we're not sure what the school service code is or where you would get that from. So as soon as I have an answer to that, I will certainly let you guys know. So, is there questions that I need to add to my list? Oh, thank you. Okay, so the school testing code is on page 45, is that correct? Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, I'm just writing that down real quick. Okay, anything else? Okay, my last session I said anything else, and I didn't hear or see any questions, but people said I cut off too early. So I'm going to give you a minute. Certainly, if you don't have any questions, you're more than welcome to end the session and log out. But I'm going to stay here for a couple of minutes, and if something comes up and you guys want to chat for a few minutes, you can do that.
Amy?
Yes.
You said something about the group information sheet. That has always been used for each teacher's classroom. It goes in the beginning of that envelope. What were you saying? You confused me that it might just be for a whole grade level now?
And this is why I'm getting clarification on this. From others, I've heard that they only had one group information sheet per grade level. So it may be that different schools were doing it a different way. I honestly just don't have the background to answer that question, and so it's on my list of questions to clarify how that group information sheet will be used.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
No problem. Okay, so I'm still seeing that everybody's still on the chat. Let's see. Is there an order for us to follow when giving? Oh, great question. No, there's actually not. Shanae, that's a great question. Several people asked that. Nope, it's up to you guys. There's different schools of thought and recommendations, but in all honesty, it's every combination you can come up with as far as in the recommendation. So I think that you guys could come up with that yourself. No problem. Okay, so I hear somebody typing, and I'm just, okay. But you have to do all of the reading in one day. Right, that's exactly right. You can't split the contents into different days. Thank you, Christine, for clarifying this. Chris makes a really great point. You have to do all of the reading in one day. You have to do all of the math in one day. Very good point to reiterate. Thank you very much. I had forgotten about that too. I'm going to add these things that we're talking about now to a little facts and questions sheet. So when I get the answers to the things that I don't know, these will be on that list.
Amy, this is my first go-to meeting, and it took me a while to get into it, and so I know I missed some at the beginning, but there was a point where you were saying that recommendation is to test during midweek, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you do it that way, using the first 2 weeks of that window, isn't it also important to do the makeup test during the same time of day that you would have done it if they'd been there for the actual test? And then you run out of time.
Yeah, the logistics on that, to be honest with you, I mean, because I don't have boots on the ground experience with that, I would imagine that you're right, it would cause a little bit of logistical organization for the makeup test. I didn't ask the question that, okay, so were makeups given on, say, that Monday following the assessments or the Friday given the assessments, or if they were given during different times of the day, like if you came and took the math and then later on, say you had a makeup test for reading, did you do that in the afternoon? That's actually a good point. I'm not sure how schools that administer this in the middle of the week handle the makeups, but I can certainly find that out and just put it on the facts and question sheet just so that you know, you guys have at least have that insight into how they handle that.
Thanks.
Okay, so there's still 6 people hanging on here. Again, you guys, if there's any other questions, I'm going to hang on just for another minute here. And yeah, Shanae's left. Okay, so they're good. Let me go, see, I think I can go down the list here. I've got Daniel, Don, Chris, Lisa.
Okay, I have another question.
Okay.
If a student's family decides to take a vacation during the testing week, We, in the past, have not always allowed them to do the makeups because we've always felt they've had control over when they take a vacation,
Mm-hmm.
or it's a choice they make.
Right.
But if they're sick, we do.
Right.
Is there, protocol from the district level on what should be allowed and what shouldn't?
I'll check on that. That hadn't come up yet, so I'm sure that there is. I'll definitely check on that and add it to my list here.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Daniel left. Lisa and Donald, are you guys good? Yep, Chris is good. She left. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close out. I'll be running another session again. Okay, great. Thank you, Lisa. I'll be running another session and tomorrow, and I'll be making this really very much appreciate all of the questions. Thank you very much. And I hope you guys have a good rest of the day.